Okay, guys, we are starting in the Second World War and the World Wars. I'm not quite emotionally prepared to go into another war. I don't know about you guys, but in the 20 years between the wars, the science of warfare advanced at an unprecedented rate. During the First World War, vast armies bled each other white at Verdun, the Somme, and on the Eastern Front, but neither side was able to achieve a clear breakthrough. But in the Second World War, superior weaponry and tactics are going to ensure that most of the great battles end in decisive victories. Aside from Stalingrad, there were also won with fewer casualties. This didn't mean that fewer people died in the Second World War. Millions of innocent people lost their lives during the course of the war. In the families that came in the wake of the fighting, in the famines that came in the wake of the fighting. So many people are going to die after there's no food after this. In Nazi death camps and during bombing raids, which both sides inflicted on the enemy civilian populations. In fact, more civilians died than those engaged in the actual fighting. Is that not something? And here are American soldiers, and they're landing on Omaha Beach in Normandy. I actually got to see that. France as part of the Normandy landings in 1944. Okay, so here are the maps that we will be referring to quite a bit. Okay, so basically what we're going to have is, here's our world. Okay, this is actually probably the best picture you could have of it. Here's our world. The green are going to be the Allied powers. The red are going to be the Axis powers, and the yellow are going to be neutral. So every continent on Earth is going to be drawn into this. And we're going to have the Allies and the Axis. And it's going to begin in September of 1939 when Germany invades Poland. And that's what I actually want you to write down in your questions. When did World War II start? September 1, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. That's the answer I want you to get. It's going to be 6 years before the war is over. So it's going to go from 1939 to 1945. All right, so this is the best map to see. You can also have these blow-up maps as well, and I'm going to include pictures of these so you guys can look at them, but these are blow-ups of what's happening right here, okay? All right, so here's where this starts. It starts because of the rise of dictators. Okay, we've got Mussolini, we've got Hitler, we've got a Japanese politician named Yosuke Matsuoko. I don't know that name as well. And then Joseph Stalin. Okay, so the years after the First World War saw the rise of a new kind of political leader, the 20th century dictator. History is full of tyrants and monsters, but their powers were limited by technology of their times. These new dictators used radios, communications, and broadcasts to control every aspect of people's lives. Their whims and fancies destroyed millions of lives. The First World War left over 20 million dead and dramatically redrew the map of Europe as we watched at the end of World War I. Great empires and dynasties had fallen, and in the sullen peace that followed, the victors nursed their wounds and the defeated yearned for revenge. Only America had done well out of the war, emerging as the world's most powerful nation. The first great dictator to emerge from the ashes of war was a former teacher and journalist named Benito Mussolini. This is from Italy, known to his followers or his people as, I guess this is Duce? I'm not exactly sure, but it means the leader. Italy hadn't done well out of the war, although it had been on the winning side. And in the early 1920s, the country was crippled by strikes, street fighting between extremist political groups, and general disorder. Mussolini, who was leader of the right-wing fascist party, swept to power in 1922, promising to bring order and pride back to Italy. With tight control over the media and violent suppression of all opposition, he gave Italians the illusion that their country had become a thriving success. But his economic policies failed badly, and he began to look abroad for a solution. Italy, he declared, should have a new Roman Empire. Okay, then we've got Hitler, and we're going to hear a lot about Hitler. Germany lost the First World War, and it's in ruins, and so the worldwide Great Depression brought further misery. And now we get Adolf Hitler, a former soldier and failed artist, offering the German people a clear solution to their problems. If they voted for him and his racist and ultra-right-wing Nazi party, they would make the country great again and destroy and destroy, they would make the country great again and destroy the causes of Germany's misfortune. These Hitler named as Jews and communists. So Hitler thinks the Jews and the communists are the problem. He came to power in 1933 and immediately began a process that would plunge the world into war and bring total ruin to his country. At the same time, we've got these Japanese military leaders. Japan had been on the winning side of the First World War, but it too was suffering from serious economic problems as a result of the Great Depression. The military became increasingly involved in Japanese politics. They believed the solution to Japan's problems was to expand her empire, not only close to home in China, but over the whole of the Pacific, especially in territory controlled by fading colonial powers such as Britain, France, and Holland. Japan produced no individual dictator like Hitler or Mussolini, but the power of the military created an atmosphere just as oppressive. And there is a quote here that says, "If there are any opposed to the imperial way, Japanese expansion," declared War Minister General Ariki in 1933, "we shall give them an injection with a bullet and a bayonet." My goodness. And then in Russia, the First World War had led directly to a communist revolution, and the country had been renamed the Soviet Union. When Lenin, the leader of the revolution, died, he was replaced by a wily Georgian named Joseph Stalin. Stalin introduced vast changes in the Soviet Union, pushing through reforms that transformed the backward country into a powerful industrial nation. But he also had millions of people imprisoned and executed, including many officers of the Russian army, which became known as the Red Army. The Russian communist rulers had much in common with the Nazis and fascists in their regulation of newspapers, radio and cinema, their suppression of all opposition, and their total control of people's lives. Okay, so now we're going to pop over here. Now there is an interactive timeline, okay, that I am going to be putting a link up with those photos that you're going to be able to see more of. Okay, so you are going to be able to see more of the interactive timeline. But until then, I'm going to, we're going to go into a video about the Second World War. And we are going to watch that here.
To understand how the Second World War began, you actually have to go back to the end of the First. In 1919, leaders of the countries which had fought in World War I came together in France to sign a peace treaty. It was called the Treaty of Versailles, and it officially blamed Germany for the war. It forced it to make big repayments and hand over control of some of its land. It also banned it from having armed forces. The treaty had a huge impact on Germany, which was already poor and struggling after the war, and a lot of German people were angry with their leaders. An up-and-coming politician tapped into that anger. His name was Adolf Hitler. Hitler was a convincing speaker, and he won fans talking about ways to restore Germany to its former glory. He also spoke about his racist views and his hatred of Jewish people. In 1933, Hitler became Germany's Chancellor. His Nazi party soon changed the way the country was run, and Hitler started calling himself Führer, or Supreme Leader. He was obsessed with the idea of a pure German race, which he called Aryan, and he wanted that race to control all of Europe. Hitler started secretly building up the German army. Then, in 1938, the Nazis invaded Austria. At first, other European countries, which were still recovering from the last war, didn't really react. In fact, some signed agreements with Germany to stay peaceful. But that changed on the 1st of September 1939, when the Nazis invaded Poland.
The mad dog of Europe has at last plunged civilization into a new world war.
Britain and France and their allies declared war on Germany and later its allies, which included Italy and Japan. The fighting spread across the globe. In 1940, France fell to the Nazis, and more countries joined the fighting. In 1941, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, a US naval base in Hawaii, bringing America into the war. That same year, the Soviet Union, a group of states including Russia, had joined the fight against the Nazis. Meanwhile, in Germany and German-occupied countries, something really sinister was happening. The Nazi regime was rounding up people that didn't fit into its plans for an Aryan race. Millions of people, most of them Jewish, were killed in what's now known as the Holocaust. For a while, it looked like Germany was actually going to win the war. But a big turning point was D-Day, when Allied forces carried out the biggest ever land, air and sea mission to take back Nazi-occupied Europe.
Adolf Hitler was presumably alive until the last days of Berlin. By the best evidence, he is now dead.
Just over a year later, Germany had surrendered.
The representative of the German High Command signed the act of unconditional surrender. Today is Victory in Europe Day.
While Europe celebrated, Japan hadn't surrendered. And in August 1945, the US made the decision to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Japan with devastating results.
126,000 died.
Japan surrendered, and the most destructive war in history was finally over. It's not known exactly how many people died in World War II, but it's thought to be somewhere between 70 and 85 million. The war changed the way the world looked. The US and the Soviet Union became global superpowers, and the United Nations was founded in the hope that another world war would never happen again.
Okay, and I'm going to put up this link for you guys right here that you can go into this interactive timeline. And remember, if you go in there, okay, you can enter, and then down here you can switch with chart. And you can go to a chart which will show all the things were happening, right, for World War II. So you can scroll back to 1939, right? And this is what I just told you to write down in your thing. Germany invades Poland. And you can look at some of these various links, and when you click on them, right, Germany invades Poland, and it will tell you all about it. Here's actually some footage of Germany invading Poland. Okay, so you can go in on that. We're going to keep that on there so that you can look at those for each of them. And then there are some other videos here, but I'm not going to include those as well. So that is what we're going to start with the Second World War.